Hey team!
It's Klaxoon.
Hey team, it's Klaxoon.
Hey team, it's Klaxoon.
And we are live. Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome, guys, to this new Klaxoon expert webinar. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Mehdi. I will be your host for the next 30 minutes. Today, we will be chatting around a very popular and anticipated topic in the world of work, which is how teams can remain efficient and productive in a virtual workplace. We know that organizations and companies had and sometimes still have to shift and adapt to optimize their way of operating. It comes with a lot of challenges, and we're going to address those challenges today with actionable insights. And to talk about it, obviously, I'm not by myself. We needed a real expert on those topics, and I'm unfortunately not one. So we are super happy to have with us today Wayne Turmel. Welcome. How are you doing today?
I am well and delighted to be here, Mehdi. Bonjour, ça va? Hola, ni hao, whatever, however people say hello who are viewing, I am saying hello.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much for being with us. And we will come back to you in a few seconds to introduce you and start having this discussion. Just before starting, quick message for our viewers. This webinar will take about 30 minutes and we will have a Q&A session at the end. So feel free to share whatever question or reaction you would like and you would have to comment, ask questions, send some love to Wayne and me. We absolutely love that. And yeah, first, Wayne, we wanted to get started before, talking about the actual topic by introducing you to our audience. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and your journey and what you do today?
Sure. I am one of the co-founders of the Remote Leadership Institute with Kevin Eikenberry, and he and I've written multiple books, but he and I have written two that are very germane to this topic: The Long Distance Leader, Rules for Remarkable Remote Leadership, and The Long Distance Teammate, Stay Engaged and Connected Working Anywhere. And the third book in that series, The Long Distance Team, will be out in February. We specialize in helping organizations, leaders, individuals just get their mitts around and focus their thinking around remote work.
Perfect, perfect, amazing. Actually, there is a question I love to ask to our guests. So when and where and why this interest into remote and hybrid settings come from? Is it something you've always been thinking about? Is it something that happened because of the context of the pandemic? How did that happen?
No, it was long before the pandemic. When I started my corporate career in training, I was a specialist in presentation skills, communication skills, and expanded into leadership and teams. But about 18 years ago, I realized that things were changing a little. I remember somebody saying to me, "It's great that you're teaching me to stand up in the front of the room, but I only talk to real people 3 times a year. The rest of the time, I'm using this thing called WebEx, which was new and foreign, and nobody knew what to do with it." And I got fascinated by how people communicated or didn't in this kind of virtual world. What was different? How do we make it work? And because I was either part of a hybrid or a fully remote team most of my career, it just became kind of a fascination for me about how to make it work and to help other people figure out how to make it work. Because essentially, we are deprogramming ourselves from 150 odd years of the Industrial Revolution and what it means to work.
Definitely, definitely. Well, perfect. Thank you. That's really inspiring to know more about how you built that expertise and that professional journey. So thank you for sharing that with us. let's jump right into the topic of our webinar. If you're okay with that, Wayne, if you're ready for that. First, we wanted to talk about, steps in a hybrid team with the two different roles you can have, the one from the leader and the one from the new joiner. So first, from the leadership point of view, how can they efficiently onboard new employees on hybrid teams?
Yeah, I think with so much of remote work, it's not radically different from the way we would do it anyway, the way we've been doing it for a long time, but the little differences do matter considerably. So when in long distance leader, the first of our rules is think leadership first, location second. In other words, if you do what a good leader should do, you're probably on the right track. And it's the same with onboarding a team. Think about how a team comes together. For the better part of 40 years, we've been talking about storming, forming, and norming, and all of that good stuff. It's all true. We come together in the way we always have. There are kind of three components. There's what's the mission? Why are we here? And are we all here for the same reason? The second thing is, how do we work? What are the processes? What are the things, the workflows that help us get the work done? And then the third part is, how do we communicate and build relationships so that everything is lubricated and seamless and we get stuff done? And so if you look at those three components, you can see that bringing newbies on board is mostly the same, but there are some things we need to be very mindful of. When you come into the building every day, the culture is all around you. There's a mission statement on the wall. Everybody is acting in a certain way, and we kind of pick it up by osmosis. So when we're bringing on a new hire, and I hope people ask lots of questions about this, when we're bringing on a new hire, it's critical that people get not only what is the work that we do, but why do we do it? And what are both the written and unwritten rules? That we need to know that. And then, how do they learn the processes? Well, it used to be, it was your first day maybe, so I'm going to take you and I'm going to hook you up with Bob, and you're going to follow Bob around for a couple of days and he'll show you how it's done.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, one of the important differences is that a lot of the team in a hybrid team isn't physically there. So how do we mitigate the problems of not getting to meet everybody? There's a very simple process that we use at our company. Which is, the week that you're hired, your first assignment is to set up a half-hour face-to-face conversation with every member of the team. And if you're not in the same city, that happens by webcam. But it's your job to set it up. You have to reach out. A half hour is enough to get way past the so what do you do? Right? You start to talk about, do you have kids, and where'd you go to school, and who's your team, and and it jump starts some of those relationships. And then when we are shadowing people, right, following Bob around the office, we actually take that job and break it up into tasks. So yeah, you're going to physically, if you're in the office, you're going to physically follow Bob around a bit. But I also want you to work with Alice, who's in Denver, but she really knows this function really well. And so rather than have one person who is your mentor, you kind of break it out by location or task. So that you're consciously jump-starting relationships that happen organically when you're in the office.
Definitely. Perfect. And so that's really inspiring to hear how the organization can actually promote that way to get integrated into the team.
Well, I don't think the organization has a choice. This is one of the things coming out of COVID now. We're in this fascinating period where everybody had a plan someday to kind of get their mitts around this. And then COVID pushed us across the river. We crossed the Rubicon, and now here we are. And so a lot of the processes that organizations had in place, intentionally or unintentionally, for example, favored the home team. People in the office got the best assignments, got the best performance reviews. Obviously, they cared more than people who didn't come into the office every day. And some of those policies were written and intentional. And no, if you don't come into the office, as Jamie Dimon at Chase said, you are in job land, not career land. Other organizations want to keep their remote workers engaged. They just haven't put the policies and metrics in place to do that yet. And they're going to have to. And if you haven't started yet, it's not too late, but it's getting there.
Yeah, it's about time. It's about time if you haven't started to work on that, definitely. That's perfect. So, for instance, like, what should those policies include in any case for you? Like, what would be the really first things to write down on those policies?
In terms of policies, it's things like, how do you build a development plan? And then how do you measure against that plan for your people, right? Do you intend to promote from within, have succession planning as part of your organization, or are you going to recruit every time there's a new job opening? They're both valid business approaches, but if your job is to grow people from within, are you making sure that the people who aren't in the office have access to the development that the people in the office do? Are you making sure that the metrics, how do I give a performance review to somebody when this person I see every day and I know 1,000 little things about them, and this person I hardly see, but how do I do an equitable performance review? Yeah. So are the metrics clear and plain? Those types of things that already exist, but they probably need to be tweaked to be more equitable and inclusive of those who aren't in the office. Again, it's mostly the same, but the differences matter. And the reason that it matters more than anything else, and I don't know any company that isn't experiencing this to some degree right now, is if you don't put those processes in place, if people don't feel like they are included and really part of the team, when you work remotely, there's no barrier to changing jobs. If I come into the office every day and I think about changing my job, well, my commute changes. Do I really want to drive further? Or, the time I drop the kids off changes. It's a hassle. If I'm working from home and I get another job that lets me work from home, literally the only thing that changes is my password.
And sometimes it's the same, but yeah.
Well, the password stays the same. Nobody's supposed to know that I'm old and write them down. But yeah, that's it's now a business imperative. It's not just it's a nice to have, it's a culture thing. It's part of sustaining the business is, do we have the processes, metrics, and the properly trained leaders?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's actually, that's a perfect transition to our second question. As a leader, it can be really challenging, right, to lead through the challenges of remote hybrid teams. What would be your best tips, best insights to make sure leaders are actually good leaders on a remote or hybrid?
The first thing that I would tell people is just breathe. There have always been remote leaders. Genghis Khan ruled half the world and never held a Zoom meeting. Julius Caesar did great out in the field. It's when he went back to the office that things kind of went sideways. So it's always been doable. The second thing is, if you think as a leader, if you do what good leaders should be doing, it's a whole lot easier to cross that void, right? If you're being a good leader, you'll probably do most of the right things by accident, right? Because you're doing good leadership stuff. The one thing that I think leaders need to be hyper aware of, and organizations need to be very vigilant in helping them learn this skill, is overcoming proximity bias.
Sure.
And proximity bias is just simply, if I have a question, I'm going to go to the person who's nearest me. I'm going to go to the person who's in my line of sight. Somebody's walking past my office and I go, maybe I need to ask you a question. And I forget about the person who is working remotely, even though that person may be more qualified, or maybe the person that I should be asking about that. And it doesn't just happen with leaders, it happens with teammates as well. One of the challenges of hybrid teams is the forming of cliques, where the people in the office and see each other every day. And if I have a question, it's a whole lot easier for me to go to the person at the next desk than it is to type in a question in Slack and wait for an answer. A good team is going to be inclusive. It's going to leverage the brain power of every member of the team. Every member of the team needs to feel like they are adding value and have the opportunity to add value. And that largely starts with the leaders setting a tone where that's the case. And that is maybe the biggest thing. The second thing is overcoming the desire, and it's usually our own desire, for synchronous communication. Most leaders up to a certain point are older than the people they lead. And we became successful doing certain things. We got successful because we were there with the boss all the time, and we learned from them, and we were able to assist them and things like that. So, that's how it's done. When in doubt, call a meeting. Right? How do we collaborate? How do we gather everybody's brain power if we're not gathered together in a meeting or on our 7th Zoom call of the day? Well, there are asynchronous tools, as you at Klaxoon know. There are asynchronous ways to gather information, share information that are not the same as being in the room. But that doesn't mean that they are not as good or as effective, or in some cases better. Nobody wants to admit that in a meeting there are power dynamics.
Of
right?
course.
I have a really good idea, but I'm the new guy, and Bob is shooting daggers at me across the table. If I open my mouth, I got to deal with Bob, right? So I'm not going to say anything.
Definitely.
A good hybrid team provides opportunities that overcome some of those power dynamics.
True. Yeah, definitely. And I can only relate because as you mentioned, here at Klaxoon, we of course believe in asynchronous communication. And people can of course have a look to what we offer to the market to achieve that. And it's really interesting you mentioned finally that the oral expression sometimes is not even democratic when we think about it. It's mostly, power coming in place and actually being a break for a good communication and a good collective intelligence.
Well, and this is not a commercial for Klaxoon, it's just an example.
Yeah.
I joined this meeting early and everybody's speaking French. That is obviously not universally the case, right, in most organizations, But it does lead to an interesting thing, which is as we expand, as we have people from different cultures joining our company, even if they're in the same city, right? If English isn't their first language, there are dynamics there that come into play. People are afraid of their accent. They are afraid they won't communicate effectively, and so they don't contribute the way they might, not realizing that most people's written English is better than their spoken English. So asynchronous communication may be the way to get the best from those people and to level the playing field a little bit. And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that you don't hold meetings, and it doesn't mean that you don't give people the chance to interact live when you can.
Yeah.
But it's finding that balance. And the problem with hybrid teams is that, you know, I can't just say, here's the rule book, knock yourself out. Right? It doesn't work that way. Depending on the culture of the organization, depending on the work that you do. Right? An IT department is going to work very differently than a marketing company in terms of when do we need people to get together and synchronous versus asynchronous and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so it's it's again a challenge, and making sure you keep that and you're aware of all those challenges and ways you can do it is definitely something to remember for our viewers. So thank you.
Well, I want to make, I just realized as you were summarizing or attempting to summarize my foolishness, I realized that, well, if the answer to everything is it depends, how am I supposed to get my mitts around this? Right? Well, it depends on the work, and it depends on who you have, and it depends on the mix of who's in the office and who doesn't. Nobody expects you to get it right the first time. Team culture evolves over time. And as we come out of COVID and we think about return to the office, yeah, we have to have a plan. But what we have to realize, and if COVID has taught us nothing, it's that, you know, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. You have to have a plan, and you have to be willing to periodically assess it and change it based on the reality. So this is going to be an ongoing thing. It's not like, oh, we're going to get together and figure out a plan, and that's what it's going to be forever and all time from now on. It just isn't going to work that way.
Yeah, definitely. Well, perfect. Thank you so much, Wayne, for those very, insights and actionable insights. Actually, we had like a last question, just for everyone that would not be a leader and that still wants to be a long distance teammate, because we actually focus a lot on leaders, but there are also ways to be a good teammate on remote or in a hybrid context. What would be like your tips for them, and how to be like the greatest teammate in that case?
In our book, The Long Distance Teammate, we actually have a model on, because we surveyed hundreds of people and said, you know, when somebody is a good teammate to you, what do they do? And we realized that there are three things. In good consultant fashion, they all start with P, right? The first is productivity. A good teammate does their work, they get their work done. More importantly, they help the whole team get its work done, right? You can get your work done and kind of drag everybody down, but then you're probably not a very good teammate. The second P is the one that was the biggest answer by far, surprisingly so, and that's proactivity. When you are in the office, you see when something needs to be done. You see somebody and you go, oh, I need to ask Lena that question. You know, when I'm doing this, there's so much going on around us. When I'm working remotely, I have a question. Well, I don't want to bother them. I don't know if they're working. Maybe I don't ask it. My manager gives me an assignment and I say, yeah, okay. And then I look at it and go, ooh, I don't know if I really understand this, but I don't want to go back and look like an idiot. Being proactive is really important. And then the third P is potential, or seeing the long-term thing. So when we're working remotely, it's really easy to become task-oriented. It's very easy to go down the rabbit hole and just focus on my tasks, and I'm going to get my work done, and I'm only going to deal with the people that I need to deal with. But that has a limiting effect, right? If I don't engage in meetings, for example, over time, that's going to change how people view me as a teammate. If my only communication with you is Slack messages, hey, can you send me this? Thanks. And I don't know how are the kids, and how'd your football team do, and all those types of things, it becomes extremely transactional.
Yeah.
And it's hard to build relationships. And we know we work better with people we know, like, and trust. If our work is just transactional, do I really know, like, and trust you? So if we look at those three Ps, and shameless plug, read Long Distance Teammate, but if you look at those three Ps, productivity, proactivity, potential, you are likely to be considered a good teammate, and conversely, people want to be a good teammate to you.
Perfect. 3 Ps, easy to remember for everyone. That is absolutely perfect. Thank you so much, Wayne. It's already 2:26. So we said, and we commit to our 30 minutes. So we're going to go for the Q&A session right now. So actually, first question, and we often have this one coming from Karen. For you, Wayne, what is your own ideal remote work setting? This is kind of a personal question, so I let you.
I will tell you that I am in it. I live in Las Vegas. My window, I can actually see, if I stand and squint, I can actually see the strip from my house. I am in a separate workspace. It's air conditioned, it's quiet. The dog has his bed right beside my desk. I'm one of those people, I have to go to work and I focus and then I leave. So having a discrete, quiet workplace that is comfortable and that has everything I need is my ideal place. I can brainstorm and noodle in coffee shops or out on the back deck or any of those kinds of things. But in terms of I've got tasks to do and I need to do this, I've got kind of an ideal situation here, but the components of that are it's physically comfortable. I have the tools I need to get the job done, and I have extremely reliable internet and electricity.
Super important. That is super important. Great. Thank you for sharing that with us, Wayne. Second question coming from Joe. So while many tech giants are going for an all remote policy, some major business leaders are imposing 100% in-office rules. I think we know who we're talking about. Do you think
if you don't Google it?
Yeah, exactly. You can go to Google, exactly. So the question is, do you think this is more related to specific sectors, and how might these major leaders disrupt the trend moving forward?
I think it is really, once a company reaches a certain size, it's really hard to create a policy that equally fits every department.
Yeah.
I think that innovation engineering probably requires more physical in person than some. I mean, if your task is drive to work, hang up your chair over your coat, sit at your computer all day, and then get up and put your coat on and leave, you probably don't need to be in the office all the time. So it is largely dependent on function. And I think some of these companies, In the tech sector, I think they are overestimating the productivity of being together. I think that certainly frequent meetings are good, frequent in-person meetings, but that doesn't mean every day, and it doesn't mean X number of days a week necessarily. I think that there are other industries, and finance is the best example I can think of, where Wall Street is saying you will come back to the office and you will do this. And I think that's largely because senior leaders have only ever seen people be successful that way.
Yeah.
They've to their, in their defense, that's how that business has worked for 150 years. And the notion of we're going to upend this and change everything we know about onboarding and training and mentoring and getting the job done is pretty radical in a business that doesn't like risks.
True.
I think, though, that organizations, as they realize that we need to be employers of choice, that we want to attract talent, that we want to keep the talent we have, flexibility and re-examining those work models is going to become more and more important.
Yeah, definitely. Perfect. Thank you guys for your questions, and thank you, of course, Wayne, for those answers. It's actually, we're going to wrap it up in a few seconds. Thank you so much for everything you've been sharing, Wayne. Before leaving, can you maybe tell us what's coming soon for you, if you have any announcement to do, where we can follow what you write and what you produce?
Absolutely. The easiest thing, of course, you can follow me on LinkedIn. You can visit the Remote Leadership Institute. Our podcast, Long Distance Work Life, is fairly new, but it's an easy listen. And I guess the single most important thing is that Long Distance Leader and Long Distance Teammate are available wherever you buy books. Odds are your company's LMS has either an e-copy or an audio copy already. So take advantage of that. And the Long Distance Team is out in February.
Perfect. Make sure you guys go check that out. Thank you so much, Wayne. I'm going to do the same for Klaxoon and invite you guys, of course, to make sure you follow Klaxoon on our socials. That's actually the last webinar for this summer. We will be back in September with great guests again and super actionable insights that will be shared. Thank you so much, Wayne, again for our session today and everything.
Thank you for having me, my friend.
And yeah, have a good one, guys, and see you very soon. Bye, guys. Bye, Wayne.